Hello students, I am Dr. Saleha Jamal, Faculty Department of Geography from Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. So students, welcome to today's class. I am here with the course Climate Change, Vulnerability and Adaptation, and today's topic of discussion is Climate change, resilience and adaptation. We have discussed in previous lectures about what is climate change, what are the different causes of climate change, how different natural ecosystems and the habitats and we can say different species overall the life forms is being affected by the ongoing climate change, how it is increasing the frequency of various weather events like floods, droughts, hurricanes, storm surges, heat waves, etc. So what are how it is also disrupting the different cycles like biogeochemical cycles, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, water cycle, etc. So now here we are with the discussion of resilience and adaptation, because all these things are going on. We have to adapt towards this ongoing climate changes. We have to build resilience in order to safeguard ourselves, in order to safeguard our planet Earth. So let us start today's class with little bit review of climate change. Actually, what is climate change? It has been defined that a long-term changes, alterations in the temperature patterns and typical overall we can say weather patterns. When we say long-term changes, now we are observing a global increase in temperature which is impacting various things in different ways. We are also seeing, when we talk about the changes in the typical weather pattern, we are also seeing the changes in the precipitation pattern, the changes in the shift in the directions of the winds, etc. So climate change is actually defined as long-term alterations in temperature and typical weather pattern. And we have also discussed the various anthropogenic activities, actually the human derived activities, and in that also in particular the burning of the fossil fuels are the significant contributors to the climate change, because it emit huge amount of greenhouse gases which is responsible for the global warming and again which is responsible for the global increase of temperature. So that's why it becomes very much important to understand the climate change. At what rate the climate change is going on, what is expected in our near future, and what are the different underlying causes which contributes to this climate change. So when we analyze these all things, then only we can develop effective resilience and adaptation strategies. So as here we are discussing the resilience and adaptation towards the climate change. First we will discuss what is resilience. Actually it is the potential, or even we can say the capacity of a certain system, how much it can absorb the disturbances that is brought by the climate change and still retain its basic structure and function. Means how much it can retain its basic structure and operations, that is in functions after being affected by the disturbances that is brought by the climatic changes, that is known as resilience. So resilience is just we can say the potential or capacity of any of the system to absorb the distances brought by the climatic changes in order to retain its basic structure and function. If we talk about in context with the climate change to which we are dealing with here, actually the resilience involves the ability to withstand with the extreme weather events. For example, sea level rise, flooding, drought condition, heat waves, storm surges, hurricanes, etc. So actually the building resilience requires investment in the infrastructure, community planning, awareness, and also many types of transformations in the social systems. How to build the resilience? So we will discuss later on, just but a little bit see it here also. Through the emotional intelligence we can build. We have to be very much courageous and we have to be prepared in order to face the challenges that is brought by the climatic changes. That is, we have to be very much energy efficient. We have to develop certain relationship perspective and priorities while dealing with the climate changes. Now, the second aspect of today's discussion is adaptation. When we have talked about the resilience, it is the capacity or potential to absorb the disturbances brought by the climate changes. Adaptation is actually making adjustment in response to the actual or expected impacts of the climate change. Means we are going to adapt it. What will be the climate change we are going to face? Adaptation means, here you can take a simple example. When we feel hot or for the summers, we generally prepare ourselves for the adaptation with the cooling devices. That is all we can say. Another adaptation for the drier region in drought conditions, practicing dry crops, that is also a sort of adaptation. So adaptation include various steps and measures that actually enhance the ability of the communities and the ecosystem to cope up with the climate variability. Actually, when we talk about the effective adaptation, it reduces the vulnerability and improve overall well-being in the affected areas. Particularly, it is mainly related to the vulnerable communities and vulnerable regions which is impacted by the climatic changes. If we talk about the adaptation, it is measures to adapt to the climate change, and again very much related aspect with the adaptation is the mitigation. These are the measures to prevent further climate change. This is very much important, and various strategies and initiatives have been devised. For example, how we can prevent further climate change. The four most important thing is to emission reduction, mainly the greenhouse emission reduction, switching over the renewable sources of energy and using the energy efficiently and rationally. These are the few steps through which we can prevent further climate changes. What are the importance of resilience and adaptation? Why we are concerned here with? We have seen a lot of repercussions of the climate change in terms of various extreme weather events. I am talking again and again that increase in the frequency of these weather events like flood, droughts, heat waves, sea level rise, etc. And we have seen the disasters also brought by them in terms of the loss of life, property loss, loss of habitat, ecosystem, diversity loss, biodiversity loss, etc. So, these has to be reduced, these has to be reversed. For this purpose, we need to work with the climate change in sense of resilience, adaptation, mitigation, and also analyzing vulnerability becomes very much important. Here, as we are concerned with the resilience and adaptation, which are very much essential to mitigate the impacts of climate change on communities and ecosystem. When we are talking about the mitigate means reducing the climate impacts. So these resilience and adaptation will help in the mitigation towards the climate change. It will also help to protect the livelihoods, especially the vulnerable areas which are prone to climate related disasters like low-lying areas, coastal areas, drought-prone areas, hilly areas, etc. So investing in resilience and adaptation can proceed to a sustainable development and improved quality of life. What are the key impacts of climate change and adaptation needs? If we talk about key impacts, for example, in extreme weather events, you have seen the key impacts of climate change and adaptation needs. In extreme events, if we talk about storm, droughts, floods, heat waves, which stresses the infrastructure, not only this also stresses and disrupts the food supplies, shortages are observed. It also disrupts the water supplies. Due to the climate change, water scarcity are being observed in the various regions. It damages home, public services, etc. That's why in this sector means the impact in terms of the extreme weather events, adaptation to these events becomes very much important, and few practices like building stronger infrastructure, developing early warning system and adopting emergency response strategies can play very important role. Secondly, another key impact we can see in rising sea levels. We know that coastal areas are in danger of sea level rise as they are facing, and this sea level rise comes with various repercussions of erosion, flooding, storm surges, habitat loss, etc. But still, we have certain practices for the adaptation which can mitigate this rising sea levels also. For example, constructing sea walls, restoring mangroves and wetlands which can reduce the intensity of the flooding, erosion, etc. and planning managed retreat in the extreme cases can also help a lot. Another key impact can be seen in the agriculture and food security, it is very much directly related to the climate, and it is a climate sensitive sector. Climate change affects, not only it affects but it overall reduces the crop yields, that due to which the price of food products rises, shortages in the market is generally observed. Also, the climate change also impacts the livestock health. Not only this, the water availability in the different region, overall impacting the food production and prices. But certain adaptation practices can help to reduce the extremities of this sector. For example, the drought resistant crop varieties can help in drier areas. More efficient irrigation system like we can say drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation can reduce water consumption, and climate smart farming practices, that is by early warning system, the farmers should become prepared and adapt themselves for in order to face the challenges of the climate change. Another key impact can be seen in the health sector, health risk, because we know that the climate change is increasing the health risk in various ways in terms of the heat waves, in terms of the changing vector-borne diseases and also the water-borne illness and various others. But certain practices again can enhance adaptation in order to face these challenges through the disease monitoring, improving access to health care and developing public health responsible, particularly for the vulnerable populations. Biodiversity and the ecosystem. We know climate change is impacting the biodiversity and ecosystem to a greater extent. Various ecosystem, if we are talking about the wetland ecosystem, marine ecosystem, are at greater risk. Already we have talked about acidification, ocean temperature rise, coral reef bleaching. Means overall we can say it is not only impacting the biodiversity but overall ecosystem. Habitat loss is taking place. It is disrupting the ecosystem, it is endangering the species and it is reducing the biodiversity. So certain adaptive practices have to be taken in terms of protecting the habitats, how to protect the habitats, creating wildlife corridors can help a lot in protecting and conserving the biodiversity, and restoring the degraded system by preserving, conserving wetland, water bodies, and by afforestation, reforestation. These degraded ecosystem can be restored in order to support species migration and resilience. So, these all practices, we can say adaptative practices, can help a lot in the adaptation and building resilience towards the climate change. Now, how we can enhance resilience to climatic impacts? Because if we are going to protect our ecosystem, where we can see the specific, we have to analyze which are the more vulnerable sectors in terms of the, we can say, ecosystem, species, or in terms of the region. Accordingly, we can invest more and give priority more to that vulnerable sector. We have to build infrastructure more resilient. We have to manage our natural resources, and we have to restore our degrading ecosystem. This all can help in biodiversity replenishment. It can help a lot in human well-being, etc. Actually, when we're talking about enhancing resilience, resilience building efforts actually aims to help systems to recover from climate induced stresses and to come back from the disturbances, which involves various resilience strategies. For example, building resilience infrastructure that can withstand with the extreme weathers. For example, building flood-proof roads, storm resistance buildings, and improving drainage system, and reduces recovery cost and supports community stability. So, building resilient infrastructure becomes very important in order to bounce back from the disturbances which are generally generated by the climate change. The resilience can also be enhanced through promoting community-based adaptation. This community-based adaptation empowers people to take proactive measures. They are encouraged to participate in conservation strategies, measures, and where awareness also plays a very important role, just like in water conservation, in disaster preparedness training, and sustainable land management practices. When we talk about disaster preparedness training, it is actually the local people who are the first one who experience the disaster to come out of the disaster. So they should be trained, prepared in order to face the challenges. Another step towards enhancing resilience is to diversify the economies, mainly through promoting green jobs, supporting the small businessmen, farmers, and also we can foster the sustainable tourism, mainly to the natural ecosystems. We can even build resilience by restoring the natural buffers, which is very important because these natural buffers, if we talk about certain ecosystems, wetlands, mangroves, forests, they act as a buffer, because if we talk about the wetlands and forest, these are some of the ecosystem which sequester carbon from the atmosphere, and if they sequester and store carbon from the atmosphere, means it reduces the carbon content in the atmosphere, which can constrict the global temperature rise. So overall, these all systems like wetlands, mangroves, forest, etc., they work one way or the other way as a natural buffers against the climate impacts by absorbing floodwaters, reducing storm surges, and even for capturing carbon. So, restoring and preserving these ecosystems really will help lot in building resilience and offers environmental co-benefits. Resilience can also be increased through enhancing social and financial safety nets, like insurance programs mainly in the vulnerable areas to climate change, emergency funds for those areas, social protection measures, will provide financial resilience and will help communities to recover more effectively and fast after climate related events. Adaptation measures in agriculture which can enhance the resilience, like climate smart agriculture practices should be encouraged, which will increase productivity while reducing the greenhouse gas emission. Crop diversification and agroforestry should be enhanced for food security and face the climate variability, and even the farmers can utilize climate information services in order to make more informed and smart decisions about planting and harvesting, which will help a lot to increase the production and overall for a good livelihood. Most important thing that we are seeing in the urban areas due to climate change, a lot of weather extremes, like for urban flooding we can see, uh, temperature rise. Mainly these areas are emerging as urban heat island, so urban resilience strategies becomes very much important. They can enhance, these urban areas can enhance resilience through green infrastructure such as parks, permeable pavements. They can increase their blue infrastructure. They can also prepare emergency preparedness plans to mitigate the risk associated with the climate change. They can also promote sustainable transportation options like cycling or even using the energy which cuts the greenhouse gas emissions while improving the urban livability. So these are the few practices which can enhance the urban resilience. So overall, after talking few of the practices which can enhance overall resilience against the climate change, there are few adaptive capacity and resilience in context to the vulnerable population becomes very much important. Why? I have said that adaptation, resilience, mitigation and vulnerability, these four aspects are the four pillars which are very much important to reduce the ill impacts of the climate change. So when we are talking about the vulnerability, we have to analyze the vulnerable areas, regions, and even the vulnerable community and population which are very much prone to climatic changes, in which the indigenous communities, mainly the poor individuals and residents of the high risk areas, becomes more susceptible to the effects of the climate change. Why? Because these vulnerable sections generally lacks access to the various adaptation resources. That's why it becomes very much imperative to include them to have a good adaptation and resilience initiatives on top priority. Communities become more resilient when vulnerable populations are included in adaptation planning, in awareness planning, education planning and capacity planning. So, key adaptation and resilience strategies in policy and practice. When we are going to integrate these adaptation and resilience in certain policies, in climate risk, in planning and policies, then only we can have a better adaptation and resilience towards the climate change, because governments are now what they are embedding all the climate risks in urban planning, even in various infrastructure projects, land use policies, in order to ensure the development in the climate resilient, which is the need of the hour. Even the climate resilient agriculture and food systems are being enhanced by climate smart farming, soil conservation, by enhancing the food security in order to provide rural resilience to climate change. Awareness and education programs are being embedded in policies and plannings by including the climate change awareness in at school level curriculum, which increases resilience by encouraging sustainable practices and community preparedness. Not only this, investing in technology and innovation, because this technology and innovation can help a lot in order to adopt certain techniques, certain ways, mode and means to face challenges of the climate change, like technologies such as climate monitoring system, forecasting system, drought resistant crops, renewable energy sources. This can contribute to resilience and adaptive capacity sectors. So, what are the role of policy in resilience and adaptation? When policy is generally adhered in particular government planning, it will be followed strictly. So, that's why these effective policies can facilitate also funding and resources for the resilience and adaptation, because we have seen most of the adaptation practices, resilience practices like building resilient infrastructure, flood proof road, having the smart climate farming, these all need funding. That's why the role of policy in resilience and adaptation becomes very much important, because it can facilitate funding and resources. Not only this, collaboration between the government and non-governmental organizations, private sectors and even the communities and we as an individual is very much important in order to have comprehensive solutions. That's why policymakers must prioritize the climate risk assessment in order to inform decision making processes, very much important, by including the experiences and suggestions from the local people also. So overall, in conclusion, I can say here now it is a call to action. Climate change, resilience and adaptation is not merely an option or choice now, but it is the necessity for the survival. That's why global cooperation, commitment becomes important in order to face challenges that is posed by the climate change. Individuals, communities and the government have to work together in order to create sustainable future. So that's all for today's talk, students. Have a nice day and thank you.